Welcome to the Still Curtain podcast, powered by stillcurtain.com in the FanSided network. It's Monday, November 10th, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are 5-4 after a 25-10 loss to the Los Angeles Chargers in Week 10 at SoFi Stadium. I'm Josh Yourish, and today it is all about Aaron Rodgers. We're going to deep dive Rodgers with a pretty much a full episode Rodgers report. We do the weekly Rodgers report every week. This week, it's really the only topic. We just got to break this down. So we're going to break down everything from maybe the worst performance of his entire career and the alarming trends this season, because teams seem to have figured out the Steelers' offense, and Rodgers doesn't seem to have any answers. So we just got to jump right into it with the Rodgers report, because last night on the Instant Reaction podcast with Mark Powell and Shane Kubas hopped on, and if you want more of my thoughts and our thoughts on the game, go check that out as well. We wanted to talk about the defense and the receivers, and it's just the offensive line. It's so hard to do that because it's so blatantly obvious how limiting the play of the quarterback is on this entire team. Like, the defense, was it perfect? No. Did the Chargers know they could be insanely patient offensively and just rely on the run game and not take any chances in the passing game, because the only way they were going to lose and give up points was to turn the ball over? Yeah. And eventually the defense let go of the rope. And how could you not? You're out there so often because this offense is completely incompetent right now. And it's completely flipped from the beginning of the year, when the Steelers were, struggling defensively, maybe taking advantage of some bad quarterbacks. And the offense was humming a little bit because it was weird. It was new. Teams were adjusting to it. And that's why early in the season, I was not getting ahead of myself and refused to, get too optimistic about this offense, because everything about it looked incredibly unsustainable to me. They relied so much on yards after the catch, so much on the quick passing game, so much on these, jumbo sets to run the ball. And I really like a lot of that as being the bread and butter. But the passing game just never looked sustainable early in the season to me, to my eye, in a different way than it was with Russell Wilson last year, where that was so much just deep ball variance. Okay, you're hitting the deep shots this week, it's going to work. You're not hitting them next week, it's not going to work. This is, late career Ben to me. Like, you're dinking and dunking. You got to be insanely precise on these short, accurate throws. You have to break a tackle or two to get the yards after the catch, to convert on first down or on third down, because you're throwing short of the stick so often. You're not willing to stand in under pressure and deliver the ball, take a hit to deliver the ball. You can't create outside of structure. You can't scramble. So it just boxes you into really, there's one way to be successful in the passing game. And if the Steelers aren't going to run the ball and really just go all in on being completely run first. I mean, it's Mike Tomlin team, so they're always going to be a little bit running the ball is going to be part of that identity. But Jaylen Warren only got 14 carries last night. And so you're putting a lot of the offense, some of that's game script, but it didn't get away from you until pretty late. You're putting a lot on a 41-year-old quarterback, and in my opinion, he just doesn't have it anymore. And so, yeah, I guess that's the fault of the play caller, but it's also, to me, it really falls on the quarterback, because this is the way he wants to play. This is the way he demands to play, not in terms of he's going into the meeting room with Arthur Smith and demanding that we rely on the quick passing game. We live in shotgun. I mean, he gets under center more than I expected him to this season, but we're just dinking and dunking and trying to nickel and dime our way down the field. He demands to play that way by the things that he's still capable of doing as a quarterback. He can't do the out of structure stuff. He can't scramble. So you're just so boxed into quick dropbacks, short average depth of target, and hoping that DK and Jonnu Smith and Pat Freiermuth and Darnell Washington can break tackles. And they really, that's getting a lot tougher, because teams are recognizing we don't have to blitz Rodgers. He's only going to burn you if you give him quick answers in the passing game, if you give him hot routes, if you bring pressure so he can throw into the void, if you just sit in coverage, make him pat the ball, make him hold on to it, he's going to get skittish. His clock's going to get sped up. He's going to do dumb things like retreating into the end zone, because there's something in his brain. He's played football one way for his entire life, being one of the most athletic players on the field. And, he's not running for 100 yards a game, but being able to always get outside of the pocket and flush and buy time. And he's just always been so good at that. That's still in his brain. Like in those moments of I'm on the goal line, but I can get around Khalil Mack. You can't anymore. You can't hold on to the ball that way anymore. And teams are just letting him make those kind of mistakes because even if he completes 4 or 5 of those quick passes, you've gained 30 yards. Like you got to really matriculate the ball down the field that way. It's not 3 yards in a cloud of dust, but it's 3 yards on a check down and a swing pass. Like it's really, it's a difficult way to play football. And that's the only way this quarterback can play football at this point in his career. Maybe it would be a little different if they had better receivers, but I really just don't think so. I watching it, what the numbers say, yeah, maybe you can do a little bit more in traditional drop back passing game, and you can shade some coverage away from DK because DK Metcalf is being like straight up double teamed, and Calvin Austin was terrible last night. And Roman Wilson, he continues to be kind of in the doghouse and not really been able to officially fully work his way out of it. It's it's just super limited. That's always the word it kind of comes back to. And some of it is, yes, limited by those receivers. But to me, it really all falls on the quarterback. So as I'm, already 7 minutes in, we got to dive into this Rodgers report. It's really the whole thing to talk about to me. It's the only story coming out of this game. Rodgers finished with a 4.6 QBR against the Chargers. That's not good. Before garbage time, and that touchdown drive, he was 10 for 23 for 96 yards. That's 4.1 yards per attempt with no touchdowns and 2 interceptions. And yes, one of the interceptions was not his fault. Went off Calvin Austin's face mask and was, picked off after that. But his 19.4 passer rating, that would have been by far the worst of his career. The previous worst was in 2014 when he posted a 34.6 passer rating with the Bears. He ended at 50.6. So, the garbage time definitely helped him out quite a bit, avoiding it being like officially the worst game of his career, but it was the worst game of his career. Rodgers on pressure dropbacks for the season. So, as I said, we're diving into this game, but it's trends throughout the season. And last night was really the most obvious and glaring example of this dude does not want to get hit. And that manifested in skittish dropbacks, in bouncing around the pocket, and constantly trying to bail on clean pockets, in throws at Jalen Warren's feet when it could be a completion, or Kenneth Gainwell's feet, in a lot of sails. Like you're seeing him miss high. Missing high is super dangerous, but it's also something you see with older quarterbacks. As the arm starts to go, the accuracy goes as well because they just have to put more on the same throws they used to be able to make. You think the throw to Jonnu in the first half that ended up being an incompletion when he was wide open. He missed DK on kind of a bit of a scramble drill really early on. That was a deep shot. He was very close to completing one to Calvin Austin, but there were just a lot of overthrows, and overthrows are the most dangerous way to miss. That's coming from him bailing and being worried about getting hit. And do I blame him? Like at 41 years old? No. But this is what happens to old quarterbacks. Like this is always what goes. And it affects the accuracy, it affects the precision, and it affects what you're able to do offensively because your dropbacks are just so brief. Like the clock is going off, the alarms start going off so early for Rodgers, and you can see that he gets such happy feet, and he's not willing to stick in there and take a hit to deliver the ball. Like in a lot of ways, the ideal Arthur Smith offense requires that. Like Ryan Tannehill, when he was at his best with Arthur Smith in Tennessee, he was completely unafraid. Like, that was one of his best traits, was that he would get smoked, stand in and get absolutely smoked to deliver the ball over the middle of the field to AJ Brown on, long play action and that kind of stuff. And that's where a lot of their efficiency came from offensively. The Steelers don't have any of that. And I have some numbers on the play action game and how that's just completely disappeared after being a nice little surprise early in the season. I didn't know if it would last, because that's like an Arthur Smith thing. That's the push and pull between the quarterback and the coordinator, and the quarterback has won. And whether that's, sheer force of will in terms of play calling and canning those plays, those play actions or whatever, because he has a lot of autonomy at the line of scrimmage, it's obvious, or it's just Arthur Smith realizing he just can't do this. He can't do these bootlegs. He can't do this long play action. If he turns his back to the defense, that clock's going off even earlier. So we're not getting anything out of it. Like, his average depth of target is so insanely low with play action this season, and it's just non-functional. The last 2 weeks or against pressure this season, Rodgers is 23 for 59 with 39% completion rate, 6.3 yards per attempt, which is not terrible. 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and a 23.1 pressure to sack rate. In the last 2 weeks, though, against pressure, he is 2 for 9 on 15 dropbacks for 22 yards, 2.4 yards per attempt with 6 sacks. That's a 40% pressure to sack rate. That's completely untenable. Like, it's not playable, frankly. Like, it is hard to get me to say Mason Rudolph should be playing football for the Pittsburgh Steelers, because I am not a Mason guy. Like, I just don't see it there. I think he's super limited as well, but he'll stand in there. He'll take hits to deliver the football, and he can move at least a little better than this. A 40% pressure to sack rate is obscene. Against the Chargers, Rodgers was 1 for 7 for 15 yards with 3 sacks on 10 pressure dropbacks. So that's a 30% pressure to sack rate. Again, untenable. Like, anything over 20 is concerning. If you're over 25, like nearing 30, that's borderline unplayable. And that's pretty much where Rodgers is. And that is, sacks are a quarterback stat. They're not an offensive line stat, really. It has to do with play style and awareness and movement and everything. But pressure to sack rate is especially a quarterback stat because, that adjusts it for how many pressures are actually getting there and what those are turning into. And, the Steelers offensive line is not great, and it's even worse with Spencer Anderson at left guard. He's just not a good pass protector. But when 40% of your pressures or 30% of your pressures are turning into sacks, it's going to make the offensive line look a whole lot worse. And that's on the quarterback. Like, as I've said throughout this episode, any issue, I can bring it back to the quarterback pretty easily. Like, it really just, it falls on his shoulders, because I think he's the biggest problem with this offense right now. And with all those issues with pressure, you should just never blitz Rodgers anymore. Like, there's no reason to. And the Chargers didn't. They blitzed him once. So they got 10 pressures, 3 sacks. They blitzed him 1 time on Sunday Night Football. And you should never, that might be too many. It gives him clear answers on the back end. It clears up your coverage. It makes it more obvious what you're doing. Like, the Colts kind of seem to unlock something, making Rodgers hold on to the ball a lot more, because Lou Anarumo does a lot with post-snap safety rotations and coverage disguises and things like that on the back end. It made Rodgers hold on to it, and he looked pretty bad because of it. The Chargers got him to hold on to it in kind of a different way, playing a lot more man coverage, just not giving him those quick answers, and playing a ton of coverage, not bringing pressure. So, or not blitzing. So it made those dropbacks go over 2.5 seconds, over the rhythm passing game, the quick passing game. And there's nothing there. Like, there's nothing that he's able to do in those situations. And you can play man coverage like that, like the Chargers did, because Rodgers can't scramble. Like, what's one of the best ways to burn man coverage, especially if, they're playing good man coverage? It's to have a mobile quarterback who scrambles. Like, that's what Mahomes and Joe Burrow, they're not runners, but they're really good scramblers because they can recognize the defense has their back turned. There's nobody accounting for me. I'm just going to take off and get this first down. I'm going to take off and get 15 yards, you know, and Rodgers can't do that. Like, you don't even have to account for a spy. You can drop truly 7 defenders in coverage, truly 8 defenders in coverage, because even your edge rushers, like the Chargers did such a good job retracing their pass rushes and working back to the quarterback. They know, yeah, maybe he'll get 2 yards upfield by the time our edge can work back, even if he's funneled up through the pocket. But our edge is gonna get there in time. Like, even a Khalil Mack at that point in his career, so much more athletic than Rodgers is right now. Like, there's no threat of scrambling at all that's gonna hurt you. You can play true man coverage with a true, like, 8-man drop, so you have safeties over the top. Like, you can bracket DK. And maybe that's more difficult to do if the Steelers have more receivers. But what's a wide receiver gonna do against 8-man coverage? Like, the Steelers do a lot with heavy personnel, so they can have more bodies in pass protection, and it's it's really tough, and it takes away your throwing out of heavy personnel because, yeah, they're getting big bodies on the field, but the Chargers especially have really talented coverage bodies at linebacker and at safety, and Derwin James and Deion Henley. And Rodgers' clock goes off so fast if you don't give him the quick answers, he can't problem solve. So it's not just as a scrambler, it's getting outside of the pocket. And they kept showing those next gen stats numbers that he has really good numbers outside of the pocket. And I've talked about that a couple weeks ago on this show. Like and subscribe, but contextualized it in that so much of that came against like the Bengals and teams that can't get pressure. So he knows he can actually buy time. And those are some of the worst defenses in the NFL that he was doing it against. So I really took a lot of those numbers with a grain of salt. Like, they were impressive. They've completely fallen off now, and it's really a problem. So to that man versus zone coverage thing, I think the Steelers are going to keep seeing a whole lot more man coverage because not only because Rodgers can't scramble against it to hurt you, but because he doesn't have that takes, if you press man and you have a lot of bodies around the line of scrimmage, that takes away the quick throws, the quick passes. You can't get to a quick slant quite as easily if somebody's being jammed to the line. It messes with the timing. It's what teams have done to Tua and like RPO passing games a lot. You just kind of press it, you throw off their timing, and it disrupts things. The Steelers aren't living in RPO land, but they are living in quick passing game land. And if you press these receivers, it's really hard to burn them because they can still have layers in their defense. They don't need to bring blitzes to speed up Rodgers. He's already sped up, so he's not going to just sit in there and pat it and read it out. If he doesn't get it out quick, he's going to try to look for an escape valve in the pocket, and he's probably going to get brought down. So a lot of man coverage to be expected from opposing defenses coming up. His Rodgers EPA per dropback versus zone this year is 0.12, which is not like amazing, but that's solid. That's very solid. And a lot of it is coming in the quick passing game because his average depth of target against zone is 4.22. Against man, his EPA per dropback is negative 0.10. And his average depth of target is 9.12 yards downfield. So a lot of that is he sees zone, you're playing a little softer on the outside. I know where the voids are going to be. I've played this game for so long. I know how to get the ball out quickly. When he sees man, Rodgers goes DK, deep shot, Calvin Austin, slot fade. Like, his mind goes to matchups in those situations, and that's not necessarily bad, but I think that's why you see the average of the target climb so much. And because they can bracket DK and they know the ball's going to come out so quickly, they can play like a really aggressive press man, even if you don't have great press man corners, and you're probably going to be fine and not get burned for it. So it leads to Rodgers throwing up a lot of prayers to DK in those man coverage situations, or he pats it, he tries to create a little bit, and he gets sacked. Like his sack rate versus zone is 3.87%. That's not pressure to sack rate. That's just true sack rate on all dropbacks. Against zone, it's 3.87%. Against man, it's nearly double that. It's 6.15%. Like that's not a massive, massive discrepancy. And some of that might be teams. There might be some noise in those numbers because you're likely going to see more man blitzes, like a higher percentage of man covered snaps are accompanied by a blitz. So maybe that sack rate's going to climb because of that. But I really think watching and the fact that the Chargers blitzed once and teams aren't really blitzing Rodgers a lot anymore since the bye, it really is because he has to hold on to it longer and he can't scramble to burn you. So what's the counterpunch? Like I kept saying that on the instant reaction last night. And I just don't know what it is. I don't know what the answers would be other than you got to run the hell out of the ball. And the Steelers just haven't been willing to do that because to get a quick passing game going, you got to do a lot of it to try to soften things up and manipulate a defense in a way you want to. And because you're not moving the ball in chunks. His scramble rate this season is 2.01%, which is 33rd among 37 quarterbacks with at least 100 dropbacks. The only quarterbacks that are lower are Sam Darnold, Jared Goff, Matthew Stafford, and Joe Flacco. Like he is completely immobile at this point in his career, and it's a problem. Against the Chargers on 14 dropbacks of over 2.5 seconds. So this is what I was saying in terms of those off schedule plays, those longer developing plays. He went 2 for 11 for 21 yards. That's 1.9 yards per attempt with 2 throwaways and 3 sacks. If you make him hold on to it, it's over. And you're going to get negative plays. You're going to get turnovers. It's not just a structural issue with the Steelers offense. Even if you had the guys to go spread and shred, 11 personnel, like more receivers on the field, even 10 personnel, the Steelers could never play 10 personnel. But if you had those bodies, there's no threat of teams could still press you. Teams could still get a ton of bodies to the line of scrimmage, and there's no threat of Rodgers creating or running. So your best bet is to get big bodies on the field with your heavy personnel, make them put a third linebacker on the field and hope you can exploit him in coverage and throw against it. And the Chargers or the Steelers do that with a really high pass rate in, jumbo 11 or in 12 personnel. But the Chargers, again, like this was a particularly bad matchup for Rodgers for this offense because the Chargers are really stout through the middle with Derwin James, with Henley. Like they can match your big bodies in coverage. They're not going to be slow moving over the middle of the field. Jesse Minter does such a good job disguising things. Like that's a really good defense. So it was a bad matchup, but it exposed all the flaws with Rodgers, and a lot of the stuff that Minter did is really easily replicated. Like it's not going to be that hard for teams to figure this out. Rodgers also, like beyond the structural aspects of it or the play calling aspects, or he just wasn't accurate. He finished with a negative 10% completion percentage over expectation. As I mentioned, he continually sailed throws, like missing high is the worst way to miss. A lot of those throws were under pressure or in a muddy pocket. Just generally for the season, he's not a good quarterback. Like the numbers are really damning. He's 31st among quarterbacks in dropback success rate at 41% and 25th in EPA per play. By just about like any metric, any way you kind of slice it, he's legitimately one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. It's over. It is done. And I knew it was coming. I knew that this was unsustainable. I knew that he didn't have the off-schedule creation stuff. We saw flashes of it. Those flashes were exciting, but it's done. And the numbers say that it's done. Like the numbers say he's completely cooked. He's one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. Why you get a guy like Rodgers or like what you want out of a quarterback who can elevate an offense, right? Is okay, you're facing 3rd and 6. He can get you a first down. Like you still believe you can move the chains. Late down success rate, He's 31st in the NFL at 31%. Do you want to hear the list of quarterbacks that are worse than him? Aaron Rodgers, four-time NFL MVP, first ballot Hall of Famer. The quarterbacks who are worse in terms of late down success rate are Cam Ward, Russell Wilson, and Dylan Gabriel. That's it. The quarterbacks under 38% in terms of dropback success rate on late downs, according to Sumer Sports, are Bryce Young, Carson Wentz, Justin Fields, Spencer Rattler, Michael Penix, Aaron Rodgers, Cam Ward, Russell Wilson, and Dylan Gabriel. Like, that's the company he keeps at this point in his career. Jacoby Myers, trading a fourth rounder for Jacoby Myers does not change that. At least not meaningfully. Despite all his struggles and shortcomings and everything, the Steelers are still in a confounding place in terms of play calling. Like, there were just 3 play action attempts in week 10. And I thought early in the season, they relied a lot on play action to get to chunk plays and get some more explosiveness in the passing game. And I thought if they could continue to access that, maybe if you pair that with the quick passing game and the jumbo running, you have something here. And Arthur Smith, like, to his credit, I think he has pulled out everything possible to try to make this work. And it's not there anymore. But he's got to go back to running the ball more. And I don't know if that's Rodgers changing plays at the line of scrimmage or just like wanting to throw the ball a ton, putting them in shotgun more than Smith would like. Some of this is a little game scripty, but on those 3 play action attempts, they're not taking shots. They're not pushing the ball down the field. Rodgers had a negative 5.5 yard average depth of target. 5.5 yards behind the line of scrimmage on play action attempts. They're just to set up screens and like try to get some junk yardage. It's his average depth of target continues to decline on play action dropbacks, and that's why they've pretty much been phased out. Some of it early in the season was he would have those long, like, this is not necessarily, the numbers reflect it, but this is more from like watching it. Those long play action dropbacks, if they're tied to a bootleg or something, or if he has to turn his back, you see that the clock goes off so quick. Those alarms start to go off. I might get hit, and it would just be checkdowns, check down, off play action. So Smith kind of went away from it for that reason because Rodgers was only throwing checkdowns on it. And now I think they're using it to try to get something of a screen game because the Steelers have been really bad at throwing screens for like much of my lifetime for some reason. When they have quarterbacks who desperately need a screen game to float them. And now that is kind of their answer to try to get it going. And the screen game actually worked pretty well. I think the Steelers averaged like something like 11 yards per attempt on screens, but they didn't run a ton of them against the Chargers. But that is something that could be potentially an answer. Not a like long term. You can't just screen teams to death in the NFL, but it could give you a little bit of life. But if you don't also have play action deep shots out of the heavy personnel, you're living pretty exclusively in a quick passing offense, and 18 of his 31 attempts were either behind the line of scrimmage or within 9 yards of it. He went 3 for 10 on throws over 20 yards down the field in week 10. The Steelers aren't running the ball enough. Like, Warren averaged 5 yards attempt, only had 14 carries. Some of that is they're not staying on the field long enough to do it, to keep feeding him. They have to find a way to run it more. Like, out of 12 personnel, the Steelers are passing at the 3rd highest rate in the NFL. So that's 1 running back, 2 tight ends. You know that by now. At 66%. 66% of the time when the Steelers have 2 tight ends on the field, they're throwing the ball. Part of that is the lack of viable receivers. Like, 12 personnel might be the best personnel grouping for the Steelers to throw the ball out of. So they're like a unique offense in that way, but that's still probably too high considering that they rank 28th in EPA per pass out of 12. Like, it's not working. So yeah, there are so many issues in terms of play calling, the viability of the quarterback. but I'm not gonna put it on Arthur Smith. I think he's super limited by a quarterback that's unwilling to have long developing plays, to push the ball downfield, who is inaccurate when he's throwing under pressure, who has taken play action deep shots off the menu, and that's so much of what Arthur Smith wants to get to. They have to just try to run the ball more, and I like that they had a creative solution to get their jumbo personnel to still exist, with Andrus Peat going at left guard and Spencer Anderson moving out to be that, kind of additional tackle. Maybe you just play Andrus Peat at left guard because Spencer Anderson was really bad there. Um, and then you can access it even more. But it's not going to functionally change a lot for this offense. Yes, you have to throw out a 12 a lot because your best pass catchers are tight ends. And that can be an advantage, but only if you have the type of quarterback who's able to exploit it. There are Broderick Jones did not have a good game. Troy Falatanu led up the first sack of his career on the Khalil Mack safety. So, like, that's on Rodgers. But, Spencer Anderson allowed 4 or 5 pressures. Like, it was not a good day for the offensive line, especially in terms of pass protection. The wide receivers played terribly. Like, Calvin Austin was just flat bad, and that's a huge problem. You got a lot to fix. You have a ton to fix, a ton to overcome with this quarterback. I just don't really see any way that the Steelers are gonna be able to do it. So, to me, it's done for Rodgers. I would go to Mason Rudolph pretty soon. Maybe give the problem is the Steelers are playing the Bengals and the Bears the next 2 games, and Rodgers is probably gonna look kinda good against those defenses because they're 2 of the worst defenses in the NFL, and the Bears have gotten a little bit more teeth since they added Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, but not in a hugely meaningful way. I think the Steelers will be able to run the ball on both those teams. They'll be able to protect Rodgers. Maybe they'll hit a few more deep shots. But when they face the real teams on their schedule, it'll maybe be too late. Like it'll maybe be the situation the Steelers ran into last year where by the time it was completely obvious that Russell Wilson should not be the quarterback for the team, it had kind of become too late to make that switch again. I don't know if the Steelers are going to run into that, but I do know that it's over for Aaron Rodgers. And we talked a little bit last night about if there's any thought of the Steelers bringing him back for next year, you got to pump the brakes on that, see how the rest of the season plays out. To me, there was never any consideration that this was more than a 1-year experiment. And I have the results now. You faced a good defense, not a defense that's impenetrable, not like the best defense in the NFL. You faced a really good defense for the first time in a couple of weeks. I mean, the Packers are kind of a good defense, and the Steelers looked really bad against them as well. It's just, it's over for Rodgers. In my mind, it's really kind of over for the Steelers. And the comment from James Fox in the chat, and appreciate it. The coaching and the team on the field sucks. I agree about the coaching, and I want the Steelers to move on from Rodgers, absolutely. Or from Mike Tomlin, absolutely. Sorry. I think offensively, I'm just not gonna put this on Arthur Smith. I think he's done a lot of creative stuff to try to solve problems for this offense. He's brought a running game that has been dormant for years to life by doing something really creative with extra offensive linemen. Like I just like a lot of the stuff he's done. I think he's so limited by the quarterback there. R Barley 18 in the chat. I'm not arguing Rodgers is washed, but with this coaching staff, no player change is going to fix awful, awful, awful game plans and a refusal to admit they don't work and changing it. Again, I kind of agree that yes, they're throwing the ball too much, but what other game plan can you, not in terms of throwing the ball, but how they're throwing the ball? I don't see any other way that you can throw the ball with this quarterback and his limitations. Teams are gonna play so much man, and they're gonna press you so much. They're gonna take away your quick passing game. Rodgers cannot do the play action stuff because he can't move, and he can't do the long developing dropbacks because he doesn't want to get hit. So then what do you have? Like, what other game plan could there be? And I want changes with the coaching staff too, but I think Arthur Smith has done a really good job considering the circumstances. So I think it's not all on Rodgers. There are problems with this team's personnel as well, but a lot of it is on Rodgers. John Brogdon, I hope this is a joke in the chat. Never too late. Time to start Will Howard and build for the future without Tomlin. Not the joke, obviously, is to me. The thing I hope is a joke is the Will Howard part. I'm fine. I'm thrilled for the idea of a future without Tomlin. Will Howard, like, it's there's not a lot there. I watched him at every, snap he played for Ohio State last year. I watched him at Kansas State before that. He's really limited. Like, a lot of the best stuff he does is as a QB run in the QB run game, and you're not going to be able to get to that because he's not quite as doesn't have the physical advantages that he had at the college level. He's a 6th-round draft pick for a reason. Will Howard is not the answer. If you're admitting this is a lost season, then okay, like, let's see him so we can see how bad he is and then decide, no, once and for all, he's not the answer. So we don't have to have fans tricking themselves into thinking he could be. But I can tell you right now without seeing it, I don't want to see it. He's not the answer. Like, he's not the guy. R Barley 18 in the chat as well. And keep the chats coming. I love this. This is a great way to end the show after a long Rodgers report. I love the interaction. I don't blame Smith, but I believe he's handcuffed to what Tomlin wants and what Rodgers wants. I definitely agree about what Rodgers wants. And I generally agree that play callers under Mike Tomlin are handcuffed by Tomlin's unwillingness to open the game up. You don't necessarily want to get in shootouts with everybody, but Tomlin's philosophy is so tied into winning the turnover battle, and that distills the game down to a couple plays, and it handcuffs you offensively, as R Barley 18 says, because you're being overprotective because possession is more important than down to down success or creating explosives, things that are not more predictive, because the turnover battle is very predictive in terms of winning and losing, but like EPA per play and EPA per dropback are probably more predictive of, if not wins and losses on a weekly basis, of sustained success over the season. They're certainly more predictive of sustained success over the season. I think, you can trick yourselves by winning the turnover battle and beating the Colts when you're not a better team than the Colts. And you didn't get any turnovers against the Chargers because the Chargers knew that, yes, that the Steelers were going to be so limited offensively that they didn't need to take chances. And that really worked in their favor. I thought it was a good game plan by Harbaugh, by Greg Roman, by Jesse Minter, like all around their coaching staff. And yes, this is another thing from Jason Hoon in the chat. I kind of have to disagree with R Barley 18. Yes, Arthur Smith is being limited by Tomlin, but it doesn't help when Aaron checks to a different play from the initial play call. That is the hardest thing for me to figure out with this team. Not like, obviously he has that autonomy, but in terms of like in the Packers game and in this game, those are two examples of the Steelers just didn't run the ball enough. Like in the Packers game, they came out in the second half and didn't run the ball after having tons of success on the ground in the first half. And in this game, Jalen Warren gets 14 carries. He is so clearly your best offensive player. I don't know if that's Smith or if that's Rodgers. And it's really hard to discern that when you have a quarterback that has so much autonomy at the line of scrimmage. So that's one of the hardest things for, like, in terms of assigning blame for something like that, because yes, they should be running the ball more. Am I going to get on Arthur Smith for that, or am I going to get on Aaron Rodgers for that? Probably Rodgers, but I don't know. Like, that's something that's really hard to actually be able to discern without, being on the headset and things like that we're never going to have access to. Dave in the chat, this is a fun one. Those who call for Tomlin to be fired, who would replace him? I I hate this line of thinking. It's it's such cowardice. You have had 3 head coaches since the 60s. And all of them have won Super Bowls. What makes you think that the next head coach you hire is not going to be good? You have so much organizational stability. You have an insane amount of job security. So many coaches. There are active head coaches right now in the NFL that would consider trying to force their way out of where they are to become the head coach of the Steelers, like a la college football, where you want to get to a better program because of the job security that the Steelers have. Now, I'm not saying they could just poach like Matt LaFleur from the Packers or Sean McVay or something, but there are ones that are on like slightly thinner ice that they could do it with. But there are also guys like Jesse Minter, for one, who had a really good game plan for the Steelers defense and weirdly has Tomlin ties that were brought up. That I wouldn't hire a defensive-minded coach because I would just like to score some points. But who I think is going to be I think he's going to be a great head coach in the NFL. I think Clint Kubiak is going to be a really good head coach in the NFL. He's doing amazing stuff with that Seattle offense. He did amazing stuff with the Saints offense last year before everybody got hurt. And Derek Carr remembered that he was terrified to get hit. Maybe rightfully so, because he had to retire because of injuries. But there are a lot of really good and interesting young play callers or defensive minds. Or you found Mike Tomlin when he was pretty overlooked in that coaching cycle, and that worked out great. It's just run its course, man. Like, you want to keep doing this every year? Yeah, Tomlin has had a tough hand dealt in terms of the quarterbacks, but he had a big hand in drafting Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett does not get drafted if Mike Tomlin does not sign off on it. And that's a big reason we're at the point where we had to go Justin Fields and Russell Wilson to Aaron Rodgers and just throwing darts on old veterans. And Tomlin's inability to like see the bigger picture of, yeah, maybe you need to take a step back, play some younger players, take your lumps a little bit to develop. And, his inability to develop young coaches or innovative minds on either side of the ball, that's a massive problem. Like, there are so many problems. I could go through the list. I've gone through the list all season. But to be afraid to fire your coach because you don't know what else is out there. Okay, even if that head coach doesn't work out, you still have organizational stability. You still have a general manager with a lot of presumably a lot of job security, who I think has done good things. Not flawless, but he's done good things. I know that your organization isn't going to just crumble. We're not suddenly going to be the Browns because you fire one head coach. Yeah, like, there are a lot of interesting young names and play callers that I think would be really good for the job. And you don't know, what lies ahead if you do fire Mike Tomlin. But I would much rather do that than live in this world every year where we know the Steelers are going to win 9 or 10 games. We know they're going to get bounced in the first round of the playoffs largely because Mike Tomlin's defense always gets cooked in the playoffs because it's just so milquetoast and bland and basic. And when teams really game plan for it, because in the season, you're not game planning the same way you would in the playoffs. When teams really lock in and game plan for this defense, they know how to exploit its weaknesses. They know you're going to play too much cover 3. You're going to play too much man. You're going to blitz too much. They're going to have quick answers. And, they'll bulldoze you in the run game like the Ravens did, or maybe they'll throw it all over you like the Bills have done and like the Chiefs have done. I'm so ready for an overhaul of this thing. It's unbelievable. That absolutely has to, and I think inevitably will, start with the quarterback position, because it is done for Aaron Rodgers, and I think the evidence is all there. So if you missed the beginning of the show with the long Rodgers report today, go back and check it out, because I think I made a pretty strong case that is just completely over for him. The cliff has come for one of the NFL's all-time greats at quarterback. And, he had a great run, but it's over. And in my eyes, any aspirations of the Steelers winning a playoff game, I didn't believe that they could preseason. But any optimism in that sense is gone as well. So that's going to be it from me today. Like and subscribe to the Still Curtain podcast on YouTube, anywhere you get your podcasts. We appreciate your support there, but also check out stillcurtain.com. So much great written content there from Tommy Jagai, from Shane Kubas, from their entire team of contributors. Like, just amazing stuff. Such fun reads, especially on a Monday. So if you haven't checked out the site, go check out stillcurtain.com, part of the FanSided network. We love and appreciate the support from FanSided, from everyone at Still Curtain, and from you, the fans, checking out the work there, checking out the work on the YouTube. It's been a super fun season in terms of doing this content, interacting with you guys, and I've had a lot of fun doing it. I'll be back to do it again next Sunday for an instant reaction show. So make sure, set your notifications on YouTube to see when the live is going to be up. We're going to go live right after that game, and then I'll have another deep dive on Monday as well. So come back for that one with your questions and everything in the chat, because absolutely love doing that and interacting with everyone. So until Sunday, we also have a Wednesday show with Tommy and Shane, so come back and check that out. But from me, until Sunday, have a great week. And as always, go Steelers.